Brynden McInness had always believed in the life he'd built. A stable job, a quiet suburban home, a wife he trusted, and a son he adored. But that illusion shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. He had come home early, expecting the usual warmth of family life. Instead, he found his wife, Sandra, nervously packing bags into a duffel. Something about her movements, too quick, too precise, set off alarms in his mind. "Sandra, what's going on?" Brynden asked, his voice steady but tense. She froze, eyes darting to his. "Nothing, just some things for the office," she muttered. But Brynden wasn't fooled. His instincts, honed through years of military training and cybersecurity experience, screamed that something was off. Over the past 3 years, subtle inconsistencies had accumulated like cracks in a wall. Late nights, unexplained expenses, and a growing network of contacts she refused to explain. He followed the trail silently, watching, listening. What he discovered shook him to his core. Sandra wasn't just hiding secrets, she was building a criminal empire, one that exploited people for money. Her smile, the warmth in her voice, the loving partner he thought he knew, none of it had been real. And yet, even as anger and betrayal coursed through him, Brynden knew he had to be methodical. Acting rashly could jeopardize his son, his family, and any chance to bring justice. By that evening, he had a plan forming in his mind, a calculated, precise plan. Sandra had spent 3 years building her empire. He could dismantle it if he moved quickly, decisively, and with surgical precision. Brynden took a deep breath, centering himself. The life he had believed in was gone. But beneath the rubble of lies and betrayal, a different truth emerged. He was stronger than he realized, and this was only the beginning. By Wednesday morning, Brynden had begun laying the groundwork. Every step was calculated, every move deliberate. He wasn't just confronting betrayal, he was preparing a counterstrike. He converted his home office into a temporary command center. Monitors lined the walls, displaying surveillance feeds, financial records, and communication logs. The network Sandra had built over 3 years now lay before him, exposed and vulnerable. For 4 days he worked tirelessly. He coordinated with law enforcement discreetly, setting up a network of informants and undercover contacts. He traced money trails, studied security protocols, and identified every loophole that Sandra and her associates relied upon. All the while, Sandra remained oblivious. She went about her day with the confidence of someone who believed they were untouchable. Brynden watched her from the shadows, cataloging her habits, her routines, and the people who followed her orders without question. Thursday night, he finally began assembling the pieces of his plan. The trap wasn't just about arresting Sandra, it was about dismantling the entire criminal organization she had built. Safe houses, financial assets, communication hubs, they would all be neutralized. Yet even in the heat of planning, Brynden felt a pang of sorrow. The woman he had loved for 12 years, the mother of his child, had become someone unrecognizable. Betrayal wasn't just a threat to their family, it was personal. By Friday, every detail was in place. Law enforcement teams were briefed, digital surveillance was synced, and financial controls were ready to be frozen. Brynden stepped back and studied the map of Sandra's empire laid out before him. 3 years of careful construction, 4 days of planning, and it would all collapse. He allowed himself one moment of reflection. Revenge was not the goal, justice was. And for the first time in years, Brynden felt the quiet certainty that, despite the pain, he was ready to take control of a life that had spiraled into chaos. Tomorrow, the trap would be sprung. Friday evening, the city seemed quieter than usual, almost as if it sensed the storm that was about to hit.
Brynden moved with precision, checking his surveillance equipment one last time and reviewing the timelines he had coordinated with law enforcement. Every call, every message, every asset was under his control. He wasn't just anticipating Sandra's moves, he was anticipating everyone who had ever answered to her. The criminal network she had built thrived on secrecy, fear, and loyalty, but Brynden knew where the cracks were. Around 9 p.m., a secure message buzzed on his encrypted phone. Target confirmed, all locations monitored, extraction team in position. It was from Detective Rodriguez, his unofficial liaison with the FBI. Brynden exhaled slowly. The pieces were all in place. He glanced at a photograph on his desk, him, Sandra, and Tommy, taken years ago at a weekend picnic. A pang of nostalgia hit him. That life was gone. That family was gone. What remained was a mission and a choice. Brynden reviewed the map of Sandra's network one final time. Safe houses, financial accounts, warehouses, they were all laid bare. Any hesitation now could allow the network to slip through their fingers. There was no room for error. Just past midnight, Sandra made a move. Brynden watched her enter a warehouse in the outskirts of Dallas, surrounded by her enforcement team. She was confident, composed, unaware that every step she took was tracked, every action anticipated. Brynden contacted the FBI agents monitoring the location. "Do not engage yet," he said. "Wait for my signal." Inside the warehouse, Sandra checked her communication devices, unaware that the trap had already been triggered. Brynden had predicted her patterns perfectly. Her movements, her routines, even the timing of her orders. Every detail had been accounted for. At 3:17 a.m., Brynden gave the signal. Red lights flashed silently on the agent's equipment. Law enforcement moved into position, surrounding the building with silent precision. Simultaneously, financial accounts tied to Sandra's operations were frozen, leaving her with no access to her resources. Through the glass monitoring screens, Brynden saw her pause, sensing a subtle shift in the air. A shiver of uncertainty passed over her face. The empire she thought unassailable was unraveling. And yet, for Brynden, the hardest part wasn't the arrest. It was watching the woman he had loved, standing there, unaware that her carefully constructed world was collapsing around her. By dawn, the first arrests would be made, and the real battle, the dismantling of Sandra's network, would begin.
The warehouse was eerily quiet, except for the faint hum of the security cameras. Sandra moved through the aisles of crates and equipment, issuing instructions to her team. Confidence radiated from her, but beneath it, a tiny flicker of unease betrayed her instincts. Brynden watched from the surveillance van across the street, every heartbeat synchronized with the unfolding plan. 4 days of preparation had led to this moment, and he had made no mistakes. At precisely 5:03 a.m., the FBI tactical team breached the warehouse doors with silent precision. Red lasers swept across the room, illuminating faces in sudden shock. "FBI, hands where we can see them!" the team shouted, their voices echoing against metal walls. Sandra froze, disbelief flashing across her features. She had built this network from the ground up, manipulated people, and thought herself untouchable. But now she was outnumbered, trapped, exposed. Brynden entered the warehouse seconds later, holstering his weapon, but keeping his presence commanding. Sandra's eyes met his, and for a fraction of a second, something unspoken passed between them. Shock, betrayal, and a recognition of the gulf that had grown between them. "How long have you planned this?" Sandra asked, her voice trembling but defiant. "Since Tuesday afternoon, the moment I realized the truth." Her gaze hardened. 4 days? You built all of this in 4 days? Brynden stepped closer, scanning the room one last time. You spent 3 years building a criminal empire. I spent 4 days building a trap to destroy it. And it worked. 2 FBI agents approached, handcuffs ready. Sandra looked at Brynden, searching for some trace of the woman he once loved. There was none. Only the man she had underestimated, the man who had anticipated every move. "Brynden, please," she whispered, a desperate edge in her voice. I love you. I love our son." Brynden's expression remained impassive. Love doesn't excuse what you did. It doesn't make you less responsible for the lives you destroyed, and it sure as hell doesn't make me forget who you chose to be. As the agents placed handcuffs on Sandra, Brynden turned and walked toward his truck. Behind him, the warehouse, the empire she had spent years building, was being dismantled piece by piece. For the first time in days, Brynden felt a strange calm settle over him. The nightmare was over. But the work was far from done. The network still needed to be dismantled, the evidence cataloged, and the victims protected. And Brynden, for all the personal betrayal, knew he was ready for that battle.
The sun had barely risen when the FBI transformed the warehouse into a makeshift command post. Evidence bags piled up as agents documented ledgers, encrypted laptops, and burner phones. Every artifact of the empire Sandra had built. Brynden stood quietly at the perimeter, arms crossed, watching his wife being escorted into an armored vehicle. Her face was unreadable now, a mask of calm that betrayed nothing. She wasn't broken, not yet. She was calculating, even in handcuffs. Detective Rodriguez joined him. "You realize this is just the beginning, right? Sandra's arrest is big, but Chapman is the one we need. He's the head of the snake. Without him, the network survives." Brynden nodded. "That's why we use her." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "You think she'll cooperate?" "She'll have no choice," Brynden said. "Sandra's smart. She knows if she doesn't help bring Chapman down, she'll carry the full weight of this herself." Back at the FBI's Dallas field office, the atmosphere was electric. Maps and charts covered the walls showing the scope of Chapman's organization. Judges, politicians, enforcers, and smugglers. It was a machine fueled by fear and profit, and Sandra had been one of its key architects. When she was brought in, escorted by 2 marshals, the room fell silent. Every agent turned, their eyes fixed on the woman who had once hidden behind the facade of a suburban wife and mother. Sandra sat across from the prosecutors, her wrists still cuffed. "If I talk, I want assurances," she said flatly. Assistant U.S. Attorney Catherine Mills leaned forward. "Assurances only come after cooperation. Names, routes, accounts, we need everything. And if we believe you're truthful, then we can discuss sentencing." Brynden watched, arms folded, as Sandra hesitated. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. The moment where she would have to choose between loyalty to Chapman or survival for herself. Finally, Sandra exhaled. "Fine, but you'll need to move fast. Chapman will know something's wrong the second I disappear. He has safe houses across Texas, and his enforcers won't hesitate to kill anyone they think is compromised." The room leaned in as Sandra began to talk. She revealed bank accounts, storage facilities, encrypted communication hubs, even the names of politicians who quietly profited from Chapman's empire. Each detail was another nail in the coffin of a network that had thrived in shadows. Brynden listened, torn between admiration for her intelligence and disgust at how she had used it. By midnight, the FBI had enough intel for a coordinated strike across 6 cities. Dozens of arrests, asset seizures, and victim rescues were planned down to the minute. Sandra looked at Brynden as the briefing ended. "I'm trying to fix this," she said quietly. He met her gaze, his expression hard. "You don't fix something like this, Sandra. You just decide how much of it you'll carry with you for the rest of your life." The next morning,
The raids would begin, and for the first time, Chapman himself would be within reach. At 5 a.m., the FBI's war room erupted with controlled chaos. Maps lit up with flashing markers. 6 cities, 14 targets, all scheduled for simultaneous raids. Every agent knew the stakes, missed the timing, and Chapman's empire could scatter like smoke. Brynden stood at the center, headset on, listening as tactical teams checked in. His heart pounded, but his voice remained calm, steady, commanding. This wasn't just about Sandra anymore. It was about dismantling a network that had destroyed countless lives. Team Alpha, confirm position. Alpha in place. Team Bravo, confirm. Bravo locked and ready. By 6 a.m., the operations began. In Dallas, Houston, Austin, and smaller border towns, armored vehicles rolled in. Doors splintered under battering rams. Shouts echoed, "FBI, federal warrant." Sandra sat at the far side of the room, flanked by marshals, her face pale but focused. She had given them the intel, routes, guards, escape tunnels. But now as the reports came in, she saw her empire crumble in real time. Dallas warehouse secured, 10 arrested, 12 victims recovered. Austin compound neutralized, no casualties. El Paso checkpoint taken, 2 suspects down, 6 in custody. Each update was another crack in Chapman's empire. But Chapman himself was still out there. At 8:47 a.m., Rodriguez's voice cut through the comms. "We've got Chapman, safe house in Fort Worth. He's on site." The room fell silent for a beat, then chaos erupted again as strike teams mobilized. Brynden leaned forward, adrenaline surging. This was it, the man who had pulled the strings, who had enabled Sandra's double life, who had profited off human misery. The raid team surrounded the safe house. Shots rang out. Chapman's guards fought viciously, buying time for their boss. But the FBI was relentless. Within minutes, the gunfire faded, replaced by the crackle of radios. Target secured, Chapman in custody. Applause broke out in the war room, but Brynden didn't celebrate. He knew better. Arrest was only the beginning. Chapman had resources, influence, and friends in high places. But today, at least, he was in chains. Sandra's eyes filled with tears as she heard the news. Relief, fear, and something else Brynden couldn't quite name. She whispered, almost to herself, "It's over." Brynden looked at her, his jaw tightening. For him, maybe. For you, this is just the beginning. Outside, the sun rose over Texas, casting long shadows across the city. Chapman's empire had collapsed in a single morning. But the cost, for Sandra, for Brynden, for their family, was only beginning to reveal itself.
The FBI's Dallas field office had transformed into a command center. Every wall was covered in charts, maps, and timelines, tracking Chapman's criminal network with meticulous detail. Brynden sat at a conference table, surrounded by federal agents, prosecutors, and boxes of evidence, the fruits of Sandra's 3 years of documentation. "This is unprecedented," Assistant U.S. Attorney Catherine Mills said, reviewing the files again. "RICO charges against 47 individuals, including judges and a state senator? This is one of the largest human trafficking operations in U.S. history." Detective Rodriguez pointed to an organizational chart. "Chapman moved over 800 people through Texas in the past 2 years. Coordinated federal raids tomorrow morning could dismantle the entire network." Brynden's phone buzzed. A secure, encrypted message. "Package delivered. Recommend immediate extraction." Stepping into the hallway, he called Andrew Grant, his former Special Operations Commander. "Package secure?" "Frozen, secured, and under FBI control. Chapman's offshore accounts, warehouses, everything is locked down." Brynden allowed a small smile. While the FBI focused on arrest, he had been running a parallel operation to dismantle Chapman's finances. It wasn't exactly legal, but it was effective. When he returned to the conference room, Sandra entered escorted by U.S. Marshals. She looked composed in her orange jumpsuit, calm but serious. Brynden watched her closely. Someone had survived her own destruction and was now providing critical intelligence. "The prosecutors want me to review the raid plans," she said, taking a seat across from him. "I'm cooperating fully, trying to make amends." Brynden studied her for a long moment. She had changed, harder, more calculating, but perhaps more honest than ever. Over the next 4 hours, Sandra provided tactical guidance: which warehouses had armed security, which routes could be compromised, and how to neutralize threats. "The Houston facility is the most dangerous. 6 to 8 heavily armed contractors. Cut the power first, expect no surrender." Brynden felt a strange mix of admiration and disgust. The woman who had built this empire was now helping to destroy it. As the meeting concluded, Sandra lingered. "Brynden, can we talk privately?" In a smaller room, away from the commotion, she spoke earnestly. "I understand why you can't forgive me, but I need you to know everything I told you about Derek and the threats was true. I never wanted this life, but I got addicted to the power and money." Brynden listened quietly. "Sandra, you profited from the sale of human beings, children. That's unforgivable." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I know, but tomorrow's raids will save hundreds. That has to count for something." Brynden felt nothing. No anger, no sympathy, just emptiness where 12 years of marriage had once been. It counts for something, but not nearly enough. The next morning, the coordinated raid struck simultaneously across 6 cities. By noon, 63 people were arrested and 47 victims liberated. Chapman's empire was gone. Assistant U.S. Attorney Mills congratulated Sandra. "Every facility matched your intel perfectly." Brynden nodded, feeling a sense of closure he hadn't expected. Lives had been saved, justice had been served, even if his personal life remained shattered. Afterward, Brynden returned home to Plano. His son Tommy was waiting, with homework spread across the kitchen table. "Dad, when's Mom coming home?" Brynden took a deep breath. "Tommy, she's not coming home. She's in jail for what she did." Tommy thought carefully. "I think sorry isn't enough to fix what she broke, but trying to help people is better than not trying." Brynden smiled, proud of his son's moral clarity. They finished homework together, ate dinner, and watched a movie. A normal evening. Quiet, peaceful, and honest. For the first time in months, Brynden felt the possibility of a new beginning. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for Tommy and himself, it was a road worth taking.
2 years later, Brynden stood in the backyard of their new house in Austin, watching Tommy practice soccer drills with his youth league team. At 9 years old, his son had grown into a confident, happy kid who excelled in school and had formed strong friendships in their new community. The house was smaller than their old Dallas home, but it was theirs, bought with money from Brynden's legitimate cybersecurity consulting work. He had chosen to start fresh, selling everything connected to their old life and building something new. "Mr. McInness," Brynden turned to see Andrew Grant approaching across the yard. His former commanding officer, lean and alert as ever, offered a firm handshake. "Andrew, good to see you. How's the new job treating you?" "Can't complain," Brynden said. "We shut down 3 major networks last quarter, rescued 47 victims, and seized over $100 million in assets." Andrew glanced to Tommy, who was laughing with his teammates. "Has he asked about Sandra recently?" "Less frequently now," Brynden admitted. "He knows she's in prison for hurting people. He writes her letters sometimes, but doesn't ask when she's coming home anymore. That's probably healthy." Andrew nodded. "I've got a consulting contract that might interest you. Private sector anti-trafficking work. A coalition of tech companies wants to develop systems to identify and disrupt trafficking networks online. They need someone with your skills."
Brynden took the card Andrew handed him. "I'll consider it." Andrew added one last observation before leaving. "What Sandra did to your family was unforgivable. But the work you've done since, the networks you've helped shut down, the lives you've saved, it turns her betrayal into something positive. That takes a special kind of person." Later that evening, Brynden tucked Tommy into bed. "Dad, I was thinking about Mom today." "About the bad things she did?" Brynden asked gently. Tommy nodded. "Do you think she's sorry?" "I think she's sorry for the pain she caused, but more importantly, she's trying to help others now. That's something," Brynden replied. Tommy reflected a moment. "Sorry isn't enough, but trying to help is better than nothing." Brynden smiled, filled with pride at his son's insight. "Exactly, buddy." As he stepped onto the back porch, the Austin skyline glowed in the distance, a reminder of the new life they had built. 2 years ago, his world had collapsed. Now it was full of purpose, truth, and resilience. Sandra McInness remained in prison, serving her sentence while cooperating with ongoing investigations. Meanwhile, trafficking victims were rebuilding their lives, supported by the resources Brynden had helped recover. Brynden had transformed his pain into purpose. He was no longer just a man betrayed, he was a protector of the innocent, a guide for the vulnerable, and a father shaping his son into someone strong and morally aware. Somewhere deep down, he realized that Sandra's betrayal had revealed who he really was, a man capable of turning destruction into hope, loss into growth, and tragedy into meaningful work. His phone buzzed, a message from Maria Rodriguez, a victim rescued from Chapman's operation. "Because of people like you, my sister and I are free and safe. Thank you." Brynden smiled as he typed back, "Knowing you're safe makes our journey worthwhile. Stay strong and build a beautiful life." He stepped inside, prepared for another day protecting vulnerable people from predators, knowing that despite the past, he had built a life he could be proud of, a life rooted in truth, purpose, and earned love. Sandra had tried to destroy their family. Instead, she had shown Brynden who he really was and what he was capable of when everything else was stripped away. It wasn't the life he had planned, but it was a life worth living.